O Come Immanuel is another Advent hymn, and it's one of the most popular of Advent hymns. The text is a translation of the Latin text Veni, Veni, Emmanuel. The original Latin text dates back to the 8th century, and it was used as a call and response during the Vespers or the evening service. The hymn was translated to English by a gentleman named John Mason Neely in the 1850s. The text contains references to the various names that are used in Scripture for the Messiah. For example, in verse 1, O come Immanuel, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here until the Son of God appear. So immediately you see the name Emmanuel, which means God with us. And the name appears again in the refrain, Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to you, O Israel. In another stanza we have, O come, great Lord of might, who to your tribes on Sinai's height in ancient times did give the law in cloud and majesty and awe. And so this is referring to a passage in Exodus 19 where we have the name of Jehovah Adonai, the name given for God, the giver of the law. In another stanza we have, O come, O branch of Jesse's stem, unto your own and rescue them. From depths of hell your people save and give them victory o'er the grave. Branch of Jesse is referring to Jesus's lineage. You have Jesse, whose son was David, and of course Jesus was in the line of David, King David. We have another reference to Jesus's lineage in another stanza, O come, O key of David, come and open wide our heavenly home. So once again, we have a reference to the lineage of Jesus, and you can see that in the book of Matthew, in the book of Luke, where it traces Jesus's lineage back to David, and in the Gospel of Luke all the way back to the beginning, back to Adam. In another stanza, we have the reference to the bright and morning star, where Jesus is referred to as the morning star or the day star. You can find that in the book of Malachi, chapter 4, or in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1. Now, the tune is called Veni Emmanuel, and if you try to figure out who wrote this tune, you're going to be out of luck because it's listed as anonymous. So this tune originated in a 15th century French chant for use at burials, or what we would call the requiem, and it was then paired with the text by Thomas Helmore in 1851. So Helmore recognized that this rather somber tune could give us the sense of experiencing death, but then the hope of resurrection, because the tune starts out very somber, and then in the refrain, it suddenly brightens up. So when you think about death and you think about resurrection, they both involve a hope of waiting upon God's promises. And so perhaps this is a good way of thinking about faith. It's a settled hope in God even in the midst of the world's decay. We know that unfortunately there is still death in this world, but the promises of God include resurrection. Thomas Helmore adapted this chant tune and published it in part 2 of his Hymnal Noted from 1854. So Helmore, he was ordained a priest in the Church of England, but his main contribution to the church was in music. So this tune, Veni Emmanuel, it's in the Aeolian mode, and it's usually sung in E Aeolian, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. It could be sung in harmony throughout, as you see it often written out in hymnals, but the preferred practice, very often you'll hear it sung in unison. The stanzas will be sung in unison, and then on the refrain, it breaks out into parts. Now, chant tunes are intended to be sung in speech rhythm, and so this hymn is meant to be sung freely. And then you get to that part, rejoice, and that is meant to really ring out through the church. You'll often hear this hymn played with very light accompaniment on the verses and then full, bright accompaniment, big organ sound or sometimes a whole orchestra on the refrain. This is a great hymn to play on the piano. I want to show you some different ways that you can play it, the chords that you can use, and so let's switch to the overhead camera and take a look at this together. So the tune for O Come Immanuel is actually in E Aeolian mode. So let's do a quick review of the modes, since it's been a while since we've talked about them. If you play them on the white keys, starting from C, going from C to C, that's the Ionian mode, which of course is the same thing as our C major mode. If we start on D and go from D to D, that's the Dorian mode. Each of these modes has their own distinctive sound. Phrygian mode, Lydian mode, Mixolydian. And here's the mode we're interested in for this particular tune, the Aeolian mode. We would also call that the natural minor. And the Locrian mode, which is the least used of the modes. So O Come Immanuel is in E Aeolian. So if we take the Aeolian mode and transpose it starting on E, we end up with these notes. Whoops, my fingering was bad there. There we go. So the tune is in E Aeolian. If you were to play it in A Aeolian, it ends up being played entirely on the white keys. And so on. There are many ways to play this as a solo piano piece. Because the tune is so familiar, you can simply start by playing just the tune. One thing you'll notice here in the notation is that there's no pause when you get to that G. And you'll often hear it sung this way. The reason it's sung without a pause sometimes is that this melody is called a chant melody. It's originally a Gregorian chant. It's played very freely. And so a lot of times you hear it with a pause here. We're going to play it straight through. And so you can start by just playing the tune because it's very familiar, it's very haunting, and I think it's very effective just played all by itself. Going to the second part of the tune here. Now we're at the refrain. There's another place where very often you'll hear it sung with a pause on Emmanuel. And they'll stop on that note and then go on. For the purposes of this video, we're going to play it without the pause. You'll often hear it sung that way. Now, we can add some simple chords, but what chords could we add? I would suggest that we use the chords that are built on each note of the Aeolian mode. So you remember the Aeolian mode in E, or you can call it E Aeolian. So using the notes from that mode, we can build a three-note chord on each note of this mode. So the first chord would be E minor, then F sharp diminished, G major, A minor, B minor, C, D, and then finally we're back on E minor. So if we look at the tune, you'll notice the first three notes clearly outline E minor. So we'll start with E minor. And then you'll notice here, in the second full measure, we have A, C, which of course is part of the A minor chord. And you could actually stay on that chord and go back to E minor. We're going to do something a little different. We'll go from A minor to D, and then to G, and then back to E minor. Now you'll notice we could stay on E minor for that entire measure, but we do have these notes, which are part of the C major chord, which leads us to A minor, and then we can use B minor as the dominant, leading us back to the tonic, E minor. And then the melody suggests, because we have A and E, we can go back to A minor, E minor, and then because we're landing on a D, that's very strongly suggesting to us a D chord. We could go to B minor. There's more than one way to do this, but for now we're going to use D. And then that leads us to G. And then the melody is kind of telling us what chords would really work. So we have the melody notes A and C, which are part of the A minor chord. And then we can go to D and then back to E minor. The chorus, or the refrain, that D strongly suggests that we go to a D major chord. And then because the next note is B, let's go to B minor. And then A minor, D, and then E minor. Stay on E minor. Then we can go to D, B minor, which acts as a dominant, back to E minor. So you can see that all the chords we've used are taken from the chords that are constructed on each note of the E Aeolian mode. So we can play it very simply. Chords in the left hand, melody in the right. Now you can practice the chords by themselves and then add the melody. Now, let's add some interest to the left hand. Of course, it's always good to start out very simply, but now let's make the left hand a little bit more interesting. We can take these chords and break them up. So you can see all I've done is create simple arpeggios. A slow one here, and then a fast one. So you can see whenever we have a chord that covers the entire measure, we can slow the arpeggio in the left hand down. Or you can play all faster arpeggios. So I'm just basically outlining the chord So that's one pattern that you can use in the left hand. You can also do something like this. So we're playing a pattern now instead of just going like this. We're making it a little more interesting. Notice how I'm using an inverted form of A minor there to make it easier. Now we can actually stretch out these chords or expand them, voice them differently. So instead of playing something like this, we can play something. This may require a little more practice, especially if your hands aren't used to stretching that far. You may have to play it slowly, which with a song like this, the tempo can vary. If you play it slowly, it'll still sound good. So what I was playing in the left hand now sounds like this. And of course, you're not restricted to playing single notes in the right hand. So we can keep that left hand accompaniment and add some extra notes into the right hand while still playing the melody. And we can even add some flourishes in the right hand. As you can see, the possibilities are endless. And of course, you don't have to stick to the chords that I've given you here. You can do something like this, for example. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, any comments, any suggestions, you can leave those in the comment section. I will be sure to respond. Let me know what your favorite Advent hymn is. I'd be interested to find out. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That helps YouTube send it out to more people who might be interested in learning how to play these glorious Advent hymns. If you'd like to support my work, you can go to my Patreon page. It doesn't cost much to become a patron of At Home with Music, and you'll have access to some extra supplementary materials that go with most of the videos that I put out. I'll leave a link in the description. Thank you again for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you in the next one.